They said the royal family was untouchable, that no scandal could fracture the image of unity meticulously curated for centuries. But what happened last week shattered that illusion in ways nobody could have predicted. Prince William, heir to the throne, has made a move so audacious, so publicly shocking, that Prince Harry was left speechless and Meghan Markle humiliated on the world stage. The divide between the brothers, long rumored and whispered about in tabloids, is now undeniable and permanent. But what exactly did William do? And why now, at this precise moment, after years of simmering tension? Imagine being at the heart of the British monarchy, a system steeped in protocol and tradition. Every word, every gesture, every invitation, or lack thereof, is scrutinized, dissected, and debated across the globe. In such a world, relationships are fragile, alliances are carefully calculated, and a single decision can send shockwaves far beyond the palace walls. And yet, even within these gilded corridors of power, Prince William has just taken a step that has blindsided the public and insiders alike. He has issued a public, official ban on Meghan Markle from attending any future royal events. Weddings, funerals, anniversaries, coronations, nothing is off-limits. She is no longer welcome. Forever. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. At first, the world couldn't believe it. Headlines erupted across every continent. Social media lit up with speculation, outrage, and disbelief. Pundits debated endlessly. Is this the breaking point in a long-standing feud? Or is this a strategic move designed to consolidate power within the monarchy? The whispers of palace insiders suddenly became shouts. It's unprecedented, one source told us. Never in living memory has a royal family member been banned from events in such a public, formal way. This is a statement, and it's intentional. And Prince Harry? He was blindsided. Reports from insiders suggest he was caught off guard, reading the statement like it was a message from a parallel universe. For someone who has spent years navigating both the constraints of royalty and the spotlight of the media, this public move by his older brother was shocking on multiple levels. How could William, his brother, his confidant in childhood and adolescence, take such a decisive, public stance? And why was this not contained behind closed doors, as royal matters usually are? The betrayal felt intimate, personal, and global all at once. Let's step back for a moment. This isn't just about a single statement or one moment in time. The story traces back years, from the very first meeting of Harry and Meghan to the rise of public scrutiny, from the conflicts over titles and roles to the explosive interviews that revealed deep fissures in the family. Every event, every public appearance, every subtle snub has been building to this climax. The tensions were there, yes, simmering beneath the surface. But no one could have predicted that the simmer would boil over in such a dramatic, irreversible way. What makes this story especially compelling and devastating is the mix of protocol, family, and personal vendetta. Meghan Markle, a woman who once seemed poised to become a symbol of modern royalty, suddenly finds herself cut off from the very institution she married into. She is barred from the halls of the palace, from grand celebrations, from the very events that once defined her life. The humiliation is global. Images of Meghan, once celebrated on magazine covers and social media, are now framed in the context of exclusion and rejection. What does it feel like to be publicly banned by someone you once considered family? What does it do to your public image when the heir to the throne delivers such a statement? These are the questions everyone is asking, and the answers are just starting to emerge. And yet, there is a method to this chaos. William's statement was not impulsive. It was carefully crafted, reviewed, and backed by senior members of the royal family. This is where the story gets even more intricate. The ban is not just a personal reaction. It is a calculated move with multiple layers of political, social, and familial implications. It sends a clear message to the public, to the media, and to the extended royal network. Certain behaviors will not be tolerated, and unity in the monarchy is paramount, even if it means making hard, public decisions. Now, here's the twist that few expected. While the public sees humiliation and betrayal, the palace insiders see a strategic consolidation of power. William, once perceived as the more reserved and measured of the two brothers, has demonstrated decisiveness that has stunned observers. He has acted with a combination of authority, foresight, and perhaps a touch of calculated ruthlessness. The ban, while shocking on the surface, signals to both internal and external audiences that the future of the monarchy will be carefully managed, and that there are boundaries even the most prominent figures cannot cross. But this is not the end. The emotional stakes are enormous. Harry, the younger brother, faces a complex dilemma: protect his family, defend his wife, or find a way to navigate the public fallout without further inflaming tensions. Meghan, on the other hand, must contend with the global implications of being publicly ostracized. Every media outlet, every social platform, every conversation is colored by this unprecedented move. And the public watches, riveted, wondering how this royal drama will evolve, and who will emerge victorious or defeated. As you watch this video, you're going to learn the intricate details of what led to William's public ban, the secret conversations that went unseen, and the emotional fallout that has left the royal family reeling. You will discover how a series of seemingly minor disagreements escalated into a global spectacle, and why this moment could change the course of royal history forever. We'll explore the private messages, the leaks, the alliances formed behind palace doors, and the shocking confrontations that have never been revealed to the public until now. So, the question you need to ask yourself is simple. Why did William wait until now? What finally pushed him over the edge to take a step that no one in recent memory has dared to take? And what does this mean for Harry and Meghan, for the monarchy, and for the very idea of family loyalty in one of the most scrutinized families in the world? The answers lie ahead, in a story that is equal parts drama, scandal, and revelation. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The cracks in the royal facade were always there, but like a glacier, they moved slowly, almost imperceptibly, until one day, they fractured in ways nobody could ignore. To understand the shockwaves of Prince William's unprecedented move, you need to go back to the beginnings of this modern royal saga, back to the moment when Prince Harry met Meghan Markle. It was a meeting that seemed almost serendipitous at the time. Two worlds colliding, one steeped in centuries of tradition, the other a glittering, modern world of Hollywood, media, and public visibility. On the surface, the union was celebrated as a fresh breath of air for the monarchy, a chance to show it could evolve, adapt, and embrace new perspectives. But beneath the smiles, the photo ops, and the public acclaim, there were already the first whispers of tension, the subtle signs of friction that would eventually lead to a historic rupture. From the beginning, Meghan was different. She was confident, independent, and unapologetically herself, a quality that would later become both her greatest strength and the source of friction within the palace walls. The traditionalists, including some senior royals, were cautious, watching every gesture, every word, every public statement. Was she ready for this world? Could she navigate the intricate labyrinth of royal expectations without misstep? These questions were not idle musings. They were constant considerations in a household where image, duty, and legacy outweigh personal preference. Meanwhile, Harry, the younger prince who had already carved a unique identity separate from the institution he was born into, was captivated by Meghan's authenticity. For him, she represented freedom and modernity, an escape from the rigid protocols that had defined his childhood and adolescence. But as the couple grew closer, it became evident that the royal environment itself was not always accommodating of such differences. Observers noted small but telling incidents, wardrobe critiques, protocol disputes, subtle microaggressions in public appearances, and tensions during private family gatherings. To many, these were minor hiccups. To insiders, they were the early indicators of a deeper divide. The engagement itself was a public spectacle, but even here, the tension was palpable. Meghan's transition from Hollywood actress to royal fiancée was scrutinized in excruciating detail. Every gesture, every outfit choice, every smile was analyzed and, at times, criticized. Meanwhile, the media narrative began to take shape. Meghan as the outsider, Harry as the protector, William as the dutiful elder brother observing from a distance, concerned but largely restrained. This narrative would, over time, fuel speculation and tension, both within the royal family and among the public. As the wedding approached, behind-the-scenes dynamics began to intensify. Sources later revealed that there were numerous discussions regarding Meghan's role in public engagements, her interaction with staff, and the balancing act between personal freedom and royal expectation. Even small disagreements over protocol were amplified in the intense spotlight of public scrutiny. Some senior royals reportedly voiced concerns about how Meghan's influence might affect family cohesion, while others attempted to bridge the gap, seeking compromise and understanding. Yet, the seeds of division had been sown, and every interaction seemed to further entrench positions. After the wedding, the couple's public appearances were initially met with widespread acclaim, but cracks began to show as the reality of royal life collided with Meghan's desire for autonomy. The pressures of constant media coverage, the relentless scrutiny of her every action, and the often subtle but palpable tensions within the family created an environment fraught with stress and anxiety. Harry, who had long been familiar with the difficulties of living under such scrutiny, found himself increasingly protective of Meghan, willing to challenge traditions and confront criticisms head-on. William, on the other hand, maintained a more reserved posture, adhering closely to protocol while quietly monitoring the evolving dynamics between his brother and Meghan. By this point, whispers of a rift began circulating among palace staff, friends, and confidants. It was no longer merely speculation. Internal communications revealed concerns about the impact of the couple's behavior on the public image of the monarchy. Even small decisions, such as Meghan's approach to charity work, social media interactions, and public statements, were scrutinized for their potential to disrupt the delicate balance of family and tradition. The underlying tension was a complex mix of personal differences, generational contrasts, and the high-stakes environment of royal expectation. One of the most telling signs of the brewing conflict emerged in the lead-up to the couple's first major international tour. Sources indicate that disagreements over scheduling, media strategy, and public appearances created significant friction. Harry and Meghan were determined to chart a course that reflected their values and priorities, often prioritizing their own agenda over established royal norms. William and other senior royals observed these developments with a mix of concern and frustration, recognizing that a public misstep could have far-reaching consequences for the family's reputation. At the same time, Meghan faced challenges in adapting to the rigid structures of palace life. While her confidence and assertiveness had previously been celebrated, within this environment, such qualities were often perceived as disruptive or challenging. The tension between individual expression and institutional expectation became a recurring theme, exacerbating the divide between the couple and the rest of the family. Every social engagement, every public appearance, every minor disagreement seemed to carry the weight of historical consequence, magnified by the ever-present gaze of the media and public. Yet, despite these mounting pressures, the couple forged ahead with a sense of determination, believing that their approach to modernizing aspects of royal life was not only justified but necessary. Harry, in particular, was increasingly vocal in his support for Meghan, often advocating for her in situations where senior family members expressed concern. This protective stance, while admirable on a personal level, inadvertently deepened the existing fissures, creating a scenario where familial loyalty and institutional expectation were in constant tension. As the years progressed, these tensions intensified, culminating in a series of public incidents that could no longer be ignored. From controversial interviews to high-profile media stories, the narrative of a fractured family took hold. Observers noted that while the public was captivated by the glamour and drama of royal life, the internal reality was one of conflict, miscommunication, and strategic maneuvering. William, often seen as the embodiment of tradition and protocol, became increasingly concerned about the implications of these events for the monarchy's long-term stability. The situation reached a tipping point when Meghan's influence on Harry began to clash with the expectations of senior royals. Concerns were raised not only about media strategy and public perception, but also about the emotional and psychological toll on family members. The divide, once subtle and behind closed doors, was now clearly visible to those within and outside the palace. Private conversations, previously confidential, were becoming sources of rumor and speculation. Trust, once presumed, was now fragile, and every interaction carried the potential for conflict. And yet, Amidst all this tension, the public saw only carefully curated smiles, poised photographs, and statements designed to project unity. The contrast between the internal chaos and external calm created an almost cinematic drama, one that would ultimately set the stage for the shocking events to come. The ban issued by William was not a spontaneous act of anger, but the culmination of years of friction, observation, and strategic calculation. Understanding this backstory is essential to grasping the full impact of his unprecedented decision. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The subtleties of palace life are rarely visible to the outside world, yet they can determine the fate of even the most prominent figures. For Harry and Meghan, every small interaction, every carefully worded statement, and every decision, no matter how trivial it might have seemed, carried enormous weight. Staff members recall moments when Meghan's assertiveness clashed with palace tradition, not out of malice, but because her worldview simply did not align with centuries-old norms. The challenge was not merely personal, it was institutional. And in an environment where appearances and protocol are paramount, the consequences of misalignment can ripple through the entire system. One significant tension point revolved around public engagements and charity work. Meghan, whose background was deeply rooted in humanitarian efforts and social activism, often sought to spotlight issues that were contemporary, urgent, and sometimes politically charged. While her advocacy was lauded by many in the public sphere, within the palace, it occasionally clashed with traditional norms of neutrality and restraint. William and other senior royals observed these initiatives with a mixture of admiration and apprehension. Admirable, yes, but potentially destabilizing if perceived as undermining the carefully maintained image of the monarchy. Another layer of complexity involved communication styles. Harry, always intensely protective of Meghan, increasingly challenged the constraints of royal protocol. While the institution valued discretion, strategic messaging, and hierarchical approval, Harry leaned toward directness, transparency, and public engagement on matters close to their hearts. This divergence in approach created moments of friction, particularly with William, who prioritized measured, controlled responses. The brothers' interactions, once warm and cooperative, began to reflect tension, hesitation, and subtle rivalry, a dynamic amplified by their contrasting roles within the monarchy. The tipping point, according to insiders, came during discussions about long-term planning for royal events and family appearances. Meghan expressed strong opinions about the couple's participation, sometimes clashing with traditional expectations. Harry, echoing his wife's perspective, advocated for greater autonomy and flexibility. William, tasked with maintaining protocol and ensuring the monarchy's stability, increasingly viewed these deviations as a challenge to both his authority and the institution's integrity. Small disagreements escalated into strategic concerns. Personal frustrations became matters of public consequence. Every choice, attendance at weddings, funerals, anniversaries, charitable galas, was suddenly fraught with implication. Media coverage only exacerbated the situation. Every nuance, every gesture, and every comment was scrutinized and analyzed, often magnifying tensions. Paparazzi images, social media commentary, and leaked reports added pressure, turning private disagreements into global narratives. William's position as the future king made him acutely aware of the need to maintain stability and perception. Any misstep, real or imagined, could reverberate worldwide, undermining public trust and potentially destabilizing the monarchy. For Meghan and Harry, this meant that personal choices could not be divorced from institutional consequences, a reality that increasingly shaped their actions and responses. In parallel, internal palace communications revealed a growing sense of unease among staff and senior royals. Whispers of strategic meetings, confidential discussions, and subtle interventions suggest that concerns about the couple's behavior were neither isolated nor fleeting. Rather, they represented a cumulative recognition that ongoing tensions, if left unchecked, could threaten the monarchy's cohesion. William, embodying both authority and foresight, began considering what measures might be necessary to preserve the institution while navigating the complexities of family loyalty and personal relationships. Psychologically, the strain on all involved was immense. Meghan faced the dual pressures of intense public scrutiny and internal family conflict. Harry, torn between duty and personal allegiance, struggled to balance his protective instincts with institutional expectations. William, caught between fraternal concern and royal responsibility, grappled with the impossibility of satisfying both family and monarchy. In such a high-stakes environment, emotional reactions were inevitably amplified, and decisions carried consequences far beyond what might be expected in ordinary circumstances. The seeds of the eventual public ban were being sown in these emotionally charged moments, long before the world became aware of the impending rupture. By tracing this backstory, one begins to understand that William's shocking public move was neither impulsive nor isolated. It was the culmination of years of observation, frustration, and strategic thinking. The public narrative of betrayal, humiliation, and division was only the visible tip of an iceberg rooted in interpersonal dynamics, institutional responsibility, and long-term planning. Every decision, every disagreement, and every subtle clash contributed to the environment in which William felt compelled to act decisively. What outsiders saw as drama was, from his perspective, a matter of stewardship, legacy, and authority. And yet, despite the careful orchestration behind the scenes, the moment of public announcement would carry consequences far beyond calculation. Harry, caught off guard by the formal ban, experienced shock, disbelief, and anger. Meghan, confronted with the stark reality of exclusion from the institution she had married into, faced global humiliation. The world watched, captivated by the unfolding drama, as private family tensions erupted into a spectacle of historical significance. The ban was more than a statement. It was a declaration of authority, a crystallization of long-standing divisions, and a moment that would reshape the royal landscape indefinitely. Understanding this context is crucial to grasping the significance of what occurred. The events leading up to William's decision illustrate the complexity of family dynamics intertwined with institutional responsibility, personal loyalty, and global scrutiny. They reveal how a series of seemingly minor disagreements, compounded by media pressure and generational differences, can culminate in a dramatic rupture. And they set the stage for the subsequent chapters, where the details of private warnings, senior royal involvement, public statements, and the emotional fallout for Harry and Meghan will be explored in full. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Before the world knew, before the headlines erupted, before social media exploded with speculation and outrage, there was a moment hidden from public view. A meeting behind closed doors, whispered about in palace corridors, but carefully kept from the press. This was not a ceremonial gathering or a routine family discussion. This was a confrontation, a moment where Prince William, the future king, delivered a private warning to Meghan Markle, a warning that would ripple through the royal family and set the stage for the unprecedented public ban that followed. And for Harry, it was a moment that left him stunned, caught between loyalty, love, and the realization that a rift he had long feared was now irreversibly real. The meeting reportedly took place in one of the palace's most discreet chambers, away from the public eye and even away from most staff. The tension in the room was palpable. Sources describe William as calm but firm, the kind of calm that carries weight precisely because it is not tempered by theatrics. Meghan, meanwhile, entered the space confident, composed, and unflinching, a posture that had served her well in the public eye but now met the measured gravity of a brother-in-law who had the weight of an entire institution behind him. Harry, present throughout the discussion, appeared both protective and uneasy, aware that the dynamics in the room were shifting in ways that could have long-term consequences. The conversation began with what insiders describe as a direct but measured outline of concerns. William, speaking deliberately, laid out a series of observations regarding Meghan's behavior and decisions as a senior member of the royal family. While the specifics remain shrouded in confidentiality, reports indicate that he addressed patterns of public statements, engagements, and interactions that he believed risked destabilizing both family cohesion and public perception. The tone was not accusatory in the dramatic sense. It was strategic, almost surgical. Each point was backed by precedent, historical context, and a keen understanding of how deviations from royal norms could reverberate far beyond the palace walls. For Meghan, the discussion was challenging. It was one thing to face criticism in the media, to navigate the often harsh glare of public scrutiny. It was quite another to hear concerns articulated by someone she had come to see as a family member, someone whose authority within the monarchy was both unquestioned and consequential. The message was clear. The behaviors and choices that had previously been tolerated, or at least overlooked, could no longer continue unchecked. The private warning carried with it an implicit understanding of stakes. If these patterns persisted, the consequences would be significant and enduring. Harry's role in the meeting was particularly delicate. As both Meghan's husband and a prince himself, he was positioned at the intersection of loyalty and duty. Reports suggest that he attempted to mediate, to contextualize Meghan's actions, and to offer explanations that might defuse tension. Yet, even as he spoke, it became clear that William's patience had limits. The younger brother's protective instincts clashed with William's emphasis on institutional responsibility, creating a subtle but profound tension in the room. For Harry, the meeting was a revelation. The implications of Meghan's perceived missteps were more serious than he had realized, and the path forward was fraught with complexity. According to palace insiders, the discussion also touched upon the reactions of other senior royals. While William's warning was delivered privately, it was reportedly aligned with broader concerns among the family about maintaining protocol, unity, and the monarchy's public image. This backing added weight to William's message, transforming it from a personal plea or family concern into a matter of institutional consequence. Meghan, hearing this, was confronted with the reality that the decisions she and Harry were making were being observed not only by one brother, but by an entire network of advisors, confidants, and senior royals, each attuned to the delicate balance of tradition and modernity. The content of the private warning, as revealed by multiple sources, was precise yet nuanced. William did not simply express disapproval. He outlined the potential ramifications of continued divergence from expected behavior. This included the risk of public misperception, media escalation, and internal family friction. In essence, he was presenting a choice: recalibrate, adapt, and work within the established frameworks, or face consequences that could be both public and permanent. The gravity of this moment cannot be overstated. It was a pivotal juncture, a chance to prevent further division, or a precursor to a rift that could not be mended. Meghan's reaction, as described by insiders, was a complex mix of emotions. She was reportedly composed outwardly, yet internally, there was a sense of frustration and disbelief. While she understood the importance of protocol, she also believed in her autonomy and the right to define her own path within the royal framework. This tension between individual agency and institutional expectation was at the heart of the conflict. Meghan's determination to maintain her voice and perspective clashed with the monarchy's emphasis on collective responsibility, creating a dynamic that William found increasingly difficult to manage. And then there was the subtle interplay of perception and strategy. William's warning was not merely a personal confrontation. It was a calculated move designed to establish boundaries without creating an immediate public spectacle. The message was clear. The monarchy would tolerate only so much deviation before decisive action became necessary. This was a moment of both warning and positioning, a statement of intent that foreshadowed the public ban to come. It was a signal to both Meghan and Harry, and to the broader world, that the lines of acceptable behavior had been drawn, and that crossing them would have consequences. The private warning also exposed the delicate psychology of the royal household. Trust, once assumed, had become conditional. Communication, previously private and informal, was now formalized and strategic. Every gesture, every word, every meeting carried multiple layers of meaning. Meghan, Harry, and William were all navigating not just family dynamics, but the institutional pressures of one of the most scrutinized families in the world. The meeting illustrated that even private conversations could not escape the weight of history, legacy, and global attention. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. As the meeting continued, the stakes became clearer. William, measured but resolute, delivered the most critical part of his message, a stark ultimatum. While the specifics of the phrasing remain confidential, sources confirm that it carried an unmistakable tone. Adjust your approach, respect protocol, and prioritize the family and monarchy above individual desires, or face irreversible consequences. The gravity of this statement was not lost on anyone present. For Meghan, it was a confrontation with the full weight of tradition and authority. For Harry, it was a reminder that loyalty to a spouse could conflict with institutional obligations. For William, it was a necessary step to preserve stability in a family under constant scrutiny. Insiders suggest that Harry's initial reaction was one of disbelief. The protective instincts that had guided him since childhood collided with the reality of the formal warning. He had often defended Meghan in private and public matters, assuming that familial bonds would buffer against extreme measures. Yet here was William, asserting boundaries in a way that left no room for ambiguity. The message was not negotiable. Harry's attempts to mediate, to contextualize Meghan's actions, were met with polite but firm resistance. The elder brother had made his position clear. The behavior in question could not continue without consequences, and the family's unity and public reputation came first. For Meghan, the emotional impact was profound. Though she maintained composure, the undercurrent of tension was palpable. She faced a dilemma that many in her position might recognize: the clash between personal conviction and external expectation. Every choice she had made, every initiative she had championed, was now being framed in the context of potential disruption. The private warning was both a caution and a signal. The palace, led by William, would not tolerate continued divergence. The implications were clear and inescapable. The dynamics of the conversation were further complicated by the presence of senior royal advisors. While William delivered the ultimatum, he was not acting in isolation. The warning reflected a consensus among those entrusted with guiding the monarchy, ensuring that personal actions did not jeopardize the institution's stability. Meghan's actions, Harry's defenses, and William's authority were all being weighed against a backdrop of historical precedent and global perception. The tension in the room was not merely personal. It was institutional, strategic, and, ultimately, consequential. Sources describe subtle but powerful psychological maneuvers during the meeting. William, aware of the high emotional stakes, carefully framed his message to convey both concern and authority. He emphasized the potential long-term effects on the monarchy, on Harry's public image, and on Meghan's standing within the family. The ultimatum was designed to resonate beyond the immediate conversation, planting seeds that would influence future decisions. For Harry and Meghan, it was a moment of reckoning, a realization that the choices they had made were being scrutinized not only for their immediate impact, but for their historical significance. According to insiders, the discussion also touched on future events. William reportedly outlined scenarios in which Meghan's actions could no longer be accommodated. These scenarios were framed as hypothetical but carried implicit warning. Continued divergence from expected behavior could lead to exclusion from key events, formal reprimand, or other institutional responses. The gravity of this projection was not lost on the couple. It highlighted the delicate balance between personal agency and public expectation, a tension that would ultimately culminate in the unprecedented public ban. Harry's emotional state during this meeting was particularly intense. Torn between protecting his wife and respecting his brother's authority, he faced an impossible choice. Any attempt to deflect or counter William's message risked escalation. Any concession might be perceived as capitulation. Meghan, understanding the stakes, remained poised, but the underlying strain was undeniable. The conversation was a microcosm of the larger conflict, a blend of personal loyalty, institutional obligation, and media scrutiny. Every word, every gesture, carried weight far beyond the room in which it was spoken. By the end of the meeting, the ultimatum had been delivered with clarity and precision. William's message was simple yet profound: recalibrate or face consequences. The private warning was the final opportunity for Meghan and Harry to adjust their approach, to align with the expectations of the monarchy, and to avoid public fallout. For William, it was a moment of strategic foresight, a calculated attempt to prevent future crises. For Harry and Meghan, it was a turning point, the moment when the reality of institutional limits collided with personal conviction. In the aftermath, the implications of this private warning began to unfold. Reports indicate that conversations continued among senior royals, advisors, and staff, all evaluating the potential outcomes. Harry and Meghan, meanwhile, were left to grapple with the emotional weight of the ultimatum, aware that any misstep could trigger public scrutiny and institutional action. The private warning had set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately lead to a historic rupture within the royal family, one that would dominate headlines, social media, and public discourse for months to come. And yet, even in this tense and carefully orchestrated moment, there was an undercurrent of unpredictability. William's warning, though deliberate and strategic, could not fully control the human element, the emotions, reactions, and choices of Harry and Meghan. It was a calculated risk, a test of both personal judgment and familial loyalty. The stakes were immense. Reputation, legacy, and the cohesion of the monarchy itself hung in the balance. Every decision following this meeting would be colored by the ultimatum, shaping the path toward the unprecedented public ban that would shock the world. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. When the private warning was delivered, the royal family understood that the tension between William, Harry, and Meghan had escalated to a level that could no longer be contained behind closed doors. The meeting had set the stage, but William knew he could not act alone without the support, or at least the tacit approval, of senior royals. What followed was a subtle but decisive alignment of key family members, advisors, and influencers within the palace, all weighing in on a crisis that had been simmering for years. The involvement of senior royals transformed a private conflict into an issue with institutional consequences, marking a turning point in the royal saga that would lead to the unprecedented public ban. The senior royals, including members closest to the throne, were acutely aware of the stakes. The monarchy is not a conventional family. It is both an institution and a symbol, and every action is scrutinized by a global audience. Missteps can tarnish centuries of tradition, destabilize public trust, and even affect succession dynamics. William's warning to Meghan was a necessary first step, but the involvement of senior royals ensured that it carried weight beyond fraternal concern. It became a signal to the wider family that the monarchy would prioritize protocol, unity, and public perception above individual grievances or personal alliances. Sources indicate that several key figures convened in discreet meetings to discuss the implications of Meghan's behavior, Harry's protective instincts, and William's growing concern. These discussions were not public, and few outside the inner circle were aware of them. Yet they were meticulously documented by palace aides, advisors, and private secretaries, forming a framework for the decisions that would follow. The goal was clear: to support William in delivering a firm but measured response while also assessing potential fallout, both public and private. The senior royals acted as a buffer, a sounding board, and a strategic council all at once. One senior source described the atmosphere of these meetings as intensely focused, with every word weighed against decades of tradition and global expectations. The participants understood that any misstep could escalate tensions, spark media frenzy, and erode public confidence. This was not about taking sides in a sibling dispute. It was about safeguarding the integrity of the monarchy. Decisions were approached analytically, with contingency plans, risk assessments, and scenario modeling, precisely the kind of rigor that would later inform the public ban. The involvement of senior royals also served to reinforce William's position. While the private warning had already conveyed the seriousness of the situation, having multiple family members and advisors aligned behind him elevated the message from a personal admonishment to an institutional directive. It was a demonstration that William was not acting impulsively or emotionally. He was acting with the full authority of the monarchy in mind. This alignment sent a clear signal to Harry and Meghan that the concerns were widely recognized, and that continued divergence from expectations would have tangible consequences. Crucially, the senior royals also debated how to balance firmness with discretion. While some advocated for a public statement immediately, others warned that premature exposure could provoke backlash, sensationalism, and further conflict. The strategy that emerged favored a phased approach. First, the private warning. Second, coordination with key advisors and family members. And finally, a carefully crafted public communication that would assert authority without overtly inflaming tensions. This strategic pacing highlights the sophistication of palace operations, where every action is meticulously planned and measured against historical precedent, media reaction, and family dynamics. In addition to advisory discussions, senior royals also considered the broader implications for Harry and Meghan's roles within the monarchy. Meghan's assertiveness and Harry's protective stance had already created subtle tensions among staff, media relations teams, and charitable organizations. The couple's actions had consequences beyond personal relationships. They affected operations, scheduling, public engagement, and the delicate choreography of royal appearances. By stepping in, senior royals ensured that these operational considerations were factored into the family's response strategy, reinforcing the message that deviations from expected behavior could no longer be tolerated. The psychological dimension of the senior royal involvement was equally significant. Their support provided William with both reassurance and authority, reinforcing his ability to take decisive action. For Harry and Meghan, the knowledge, or eventual realization, that key figures within the family were aligned with William added pressure and emotional weight. It was no longer a disagreement between brothers or spouses. It had become a matter of institutional expectation, backed by those with influence, experience, and historical perspective. This collective alignment amplified the seriousness of the ultimatum, setting the stage for an irreversible shift in family dynamics. As the senior royals stepped in, they also began monitoring media narratives, public sentiment, and internal communications. Their objective was to anticipate potential fallout and manage perceptions, ensuring that the monarchy's image remained intact while the private tensions unfolded. This involved strategic planning, messaging coordination, and the cultivation of allies within palace staff and external media channels. The combination of internal alignment and external preparation created a controlled environment for what would eventually become a public confrontation of unprecedented scale. Yet, even with careful orchestration, human emotions remained unpredictable. Harry's loyalty to Meghan, Meghan's determination to assert her agency, and William's commitment to duty created a volatile mix. The senior royals could provide guidance, support, and authority, but they could not dictate emotional reactions or control decisions entirely. This uncertainty contributed to the tension and suspense that would eventually captivate global audiences when the public ban was announced. And so, with senior royals aligned, advisors consulted, and strategies in place, the monarchy prepared for a course of action that would be historic. The private warning was now reinforced by institutional authority, creating a framework within which William could act decisively. What began as a family concern had evolved into a matter of strategic necessity, balancing personal relationships, institutional integrity, and public perception. The next steps would propel the story into uncharted territory, setting the stage for the shockwaves that would reverberate worldwide. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The involvement of senior royals quickly became a decisive force shaping the unfolding drama. While William had delivered the private warning, the consensus and tacit support from other senior family members amplified the message, transforming it from a personal admonishment into an institutional expectation. Advisors, confidants, and senior household staff all played a role, ensuring that the stakes were understood and that the response would be consistent with the monarchy's long-term strategy. This backing added layers of authority and legitimacy to William's position, leaving little room for negotiation or misunderstanding. Sources report that the senior royals were particularly focused on ensuring consistency and predictability in messaging. Every communication, whether internal to staff, external to the press, or private to Harry and Meghan, was reviewed and analyzed for potential implications. The goal was to manage perception, control the narrative, and prevent any misinterpretation that could escalate tensions further. This involved careful choreography, deciding what to reveal, what to keep confidential, and how to present the family as unified even amidst escalating internal conflict. Strategically, the senior royals' involvement also sent a subtle warning. Deviation from established norms would not be tolerated. While the private warning had framed the issue as a matter of behavioral adjustment, the backing of senior family members reinforced that failure to comply could have tangible consequences. They understood the importance of establishing boundaries early, before minor conflicts escalated into crises that could threaten public confidence in the monarchy. By aligning themselves with William, the senior royals created a framework for enforcement that was both authoritative and deliberate. This alignment was not without internal debate. While many supported William's approach, some advisors and family members expressed concern about the emotional and public implications of taking firm action. They worried that overt measures might provoke backlash or deepen divisions. Yet, the prevailing view was that inaction posed an even greater risk. The monarchy's reputation, history, and continuity depended on the ability of its members to adhere to shared norms and expectations. The senior royals concluded that measured, strategic intervention was necessary to preserve the institution, even if it strained personal relationships. Another factor driving their involvement was the need to prepare for potential fallout. The palace had learned from previous controversies that private disagreements, if leaked, could ignite public speculation and media frenzy. By stepping in early, senior royals aimed to manage both internal dynamics and external perceptions. This included briefing key staff, monitoring media coverage, and establishing contingency plans for various scenarios. Their presence reinforced the seriousness of the matter, signaling to Harry and Meghan that the stakes were not merely personal. They were institutional. The impact on Harry and Meghan was immediate. Even without direct confrontation, the knowledge that senior royals were aligned with William heightened the pressure. Harry, protective yet constrained, had to navigate the delicate line between supporting his wife and acknowledging the authority of the family hierarchy. Meghan, confident but increasingly aware of the institutional weight arrayed against her, faced the reality that her autonomy was being challenged not by a single individual but by an entire system of authority. The dynamics of loyalty, strategy, and influence converged in ways that left both spouses grappling with a complex and emotionally charged landscape. The senior royals also played a crucial role in setting expectations for the future. They were not only concerned with immediate behavior, but also with long-term patterns. By signaling that boundaries were now formalized, they established a precedent that would inform subsequent decisions, including attendance at events, public statements, and the couple's roles within the monarchy. Their involvement ensured that the warning was not ephemeral. It was a structural intervention designed to shape the trajectory of family dynamics over months and years, not just weeks. Psychologically, their support gave William both confidence and leverage. He could act decisively, knowing that his position was reinforced by institutional authority. This collective alignment amplified the seriousness of the warning and provided a clear signal to Harry and Meghan that continued divergence from expectations would no longer be negotiable. It was a calculated, strategic move designed to preserve both familial cohesion and public perception, even as it created intense personal and emotional pressure. Even with senior royals aligned, however, uncertainty remained. Human emotions are unpredictable, and while protocols, precedent, and authority provide structure, they cannot entirely dictate behavior. Harry's protective instincts, Meghan's assertiveness, and William's determination all introduced variables that no amount of planning could fully control. The senior royal's role was to mitigate risk, provide support, and enforce boundaries, but the unfolding drama was still subject to the choices and reactions of the key players themselves. Ultimately, the intervention of senior royals set the stage for an unprecedented course of action. What began as a private warning escalated into a matter of institutional oversight, reinforced by authority and strategy. The palace had aligned its leadership, advisors, and communication channels, preparing for a decisive moment that would soon unfold publicly. William's message was no longer just a family admonishment. It was a statement backed by the weight of tradition, authority, and the monarchy itself. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The day the announcement went public, the world seemed to stop. News outlets, social media, and every major network exploded simultaneously, their headlines screaming disbelief. Prince William bans Meghan Markle from all future royal events. Harry left speechless as royal rift goes public. Monarchy in crisis? The private tension that had simmered behind closed doors for months, years, even, was no longer hidden. It had erupted into the open, irreversibly, leaving the global audience captivated, divided, and horrified in equal measure. For many, it was unimaginable that a senior member of the royal family could be publicly barred from attending anything, from weddings to funerals, coronations to anniversaries. The weight of this moment could not be overstated. The announcement was carefully crafted, a statement that carried both authority and precision. Sources reveal that William, working closely with senior advisors and members of the royal communications team, drafted the wording to ensure maximum impact while maintaining a veneer of decorum. There was no emotional outburst, no personal attack. The statement was formal, deliberate, and absolute. The language was unequivocal. Meghan Markle was no longer welcome at any palace function. The clarity left no room for misinterpretation. Unlike the private warning, which had allowed for discretion and nuance, this was public, permanent, and absolute. Within the palace, reactions were intense but measured. William reportedly remained composed, a calm exterior belying the high stakes and careful calculations behind the announcement. Advisors had prepared him for the media storm, the inevitable global reaction, and the questions from reporters, both direct and speculative. Every word, every pause, every inflection was considered, because in this environment, even a slight misstep could be magnified worldwide. William's goal was simple: assert authority, preserve institutional integrity, and convey the seriousness of the breach without turning the moment into personal drama. Yet, the emotional undercurrent of family tension was palpable even through the polished statement. For Harry, the announcement was devastating. Witnessing a private family conflict become a matter of public spectacle is one thing. Reading an official declaration that his wife was banned from all future royal events is another entirely. Reports suggest that Harry initially refused to believe it, thinking perhaps there had been a miscommunication or misunderstanding. But as the wording was repeated across news outlets and social media, the reality settled in. The protective instincts that had defined much of his public narrative kicked in. Anger, frustration, disbelief, and a deep sense of betrayal all converged. Here was the man who had stood beside his brother in countless moments of personal and public significance, now delivering a statement that would define the public perception of their family forever. The global media reaction was immediate and intense. News organizations across continents broke the story, social media trends erupted, and countless commentators weighed in with opinion, analysis, and speculation. Headlines emphasized both the shock of the ban and its broader implications. The monarchy's image, the relationship between the brothers, and the ongoing saga of Harry and Meghan. Even those who had followed the royal family for years were stunned. The ban was unprecedented in scope, clarity, and publicness. It was a moment that would be dissected for months, if not years. Behind the public announcements, the palace had anticipated the backlash. Advisors had prepared talking points, briefing notes, and carefully crafted messaging strategies to address reporters, journalists, and palace staff. The aim was to maintain composure, project authority, and frame the announcement as a matter of institutional necessity rather than personal vendetta. The strategy also involved highlighting the alignment of senior royals with William's position, underscoring that this was not a unilateral decision but one supported by multiple pillars of the monarchy. Yet, despite careful preparation, the human element, Harry's reaction, Meghan's response, and public sentiment, remained unpredictable, adding a layer of tension that advisors could not fully control. Sources close to the family reveal that Meghan's immediate reaction was a mixture of shock, humiliation, and disbelief. Publicly, she had always projected composure and confidence, but privately, the gravity of the statement was overwhelming. Friends and insiders describe her as stunned, attempting to process the permanence and absolute nature of the ban. The realization that she would be excluded from all future royal functions, a life that had previously offered privilege, visibility, and connection, was devastating. In that moment, the reality of institutional boundaries collided with personal ambition, creating an emotional rupture that would have lasting consequences. The public announcement also had a profound ripple effect on palace staff and affiliated organizations. Everyone from household aides to communications teams found themselves navigating a new reality. A senior family member had been banned, publicly and permanently, from all official events. Operations, scheduling, and public relations now required recalibration, and the palace had to manage both internal morale and external perception simultaneously. The announcement had elevated a private conflict into a matter of public policy, forcing the monarchy to adapt to an unprecedented scenario. Even with all the preparation, the emotional undertone of the announcement was undeniable. William, as the future king, demonstrated decisive action. Harry, as the protective brother, was stunned and angered. Meghan, as the affected party, was humiliated and uncertain. For the global audience, this was both spectacle and drama, the kind that dominates headlines and social discourse. Every element of the announcement, from its careful wording to its timing, was meticulously calculated, yet the human reactions, the shock, the outrage, the analysis, added an unpredictable layer that would fuel media coverage and public debate for months to come. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The immediate aftermath of the announcement was a whirlwind of emotions, reactions, and unprecedented scrutiny. Social media platforms were flooded with commentary, ranging from shock and support for William's decisive stance to sympathy and outrage for Meghan and Harry. Memes circulated within hours, news outlets debated endlessly, and the story dominated headlines for days. What made this moment extraordinary was not just the ban itself, but the layers of meaning embedded within it. A message of authority, a public spectacle of family tension, and an irreversible reshaping of royal dynamics. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was tense and tightly controlled. William's team monitored every reaction, prepared statements, and coordinated with senior royals to ensure a unified front. Advisors emphasized that while the public might react emotionally, the monarchy's credibility depended on demonstrating order, discipline, and authority. This was not a personal vendetta, they argued. It was governance, a strategic decision to safeguard the institution. Every press release, official photo, and subsequent statement was carefully curated to maintain this narrative, even as speculation ran rampant outside the palace walls. Harry's reaction during these early hours was intense. He reportedly oscillated between disbelief, anger, and deep concern for Meghan's well-being. For someone who had already experienced intense public scrutiny, the formal and permanent nature of the ban was particularly jarring. It was no longer a matter of private family disagreement. It was a statement made with institutional authority, with ramifications that could never be undone. Harry immediately began consulting with advisors, attempting to weigh options for response, mitigation, and protection for Meghan. The emotional weight of the moment was compounded by the global spotlight. Every decision was magnified 1,000 times. For Meghan, the announcement was humiliating on multiple fronts. It represented both exclusion from a family she had married into and the erosion of her public image. Friends close to the couple noted that she felt blindsided, not only by the severity of the ban, but by the knowledge that senior royals were aligned with William's position. The permanence of the decision carried symbolic significance. It was not a temporary rebuke, but a formal codification of separation and restriction. For someone who had previously been at the center of royal attention, this public repudiation was a stark reminder of the boundaries imposed by tradition and institutional authority. The global media landscape reacted instantly. Analysts dissected the wording of the announcement, comparing it to historical precedents and assessing its broader implications. Royal watchers speculated on motives, predicting that the ban could exacerbate the already tense relationship between William and Harry. Public opinion was polarized. Some praised William for maintaining order and protecting the monarchy's legacy, while others criticized him for what they perceived as a harsh and public familial punishment. The media frenzy amplified every nuance, transforming an internal family matter into a worldwide conversation about authority, loyalty, and personal agency. Within the palace, efforts were made to manage both internal and external responses. Senior staff coordinated with communications teams, advisors, and household personnel to ensure consistency and discretion. Contingency plans were developed to address potential media inquiries, public protests, and diplomatic concerns. The formal nature of the announcement meant that the family had to navigate a complex matrix of protocol, optics, and internal relationships. Each subsequent move was calculated, emphasizing restraint, authority, and the overarching narrative of institutional integrity. The emotional complexity extended to public perception as well. Audiences worldwide grappled with conflicting narratives: a dutiful future king taking decisive action to preserve tradition, a brother protecting the monarchy's reputation, and a woman publicly ostracized from the very institution she had joined. The story became a cultural phenomenon, prompting debates on social media, talk shows, podcasts, and commentary platforms. Every development, rumor, and leaked detail fueled engagement, creating a feedback loop that magnified the emotional stakes and public scrutiny.